It can be confusing to locate specific pitches on a keyboard, or any other instrument for that matter, because there are very many instances of each note name, each occupying a specific register. For this reason, it is helpful to have a more specific way to designate pitch, using both its letter name and the particular octave register it belongs to. For this purpose, we will partition the notes into octave registers, always bordered on the note C. The most basic scale, that is, note collection, that we will learn in a subsequent chapter is the C scale, and that is why we partition the notes this way. With this system of octave designations, we now have a new name for middle C, C4. Now it is much easier to communicate specific pitches more clearly. For example, we can see that B3 is lower than C4, and that D5 is one octave higher than D4. The system is borrowed from MIDI nomenclature, that is, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It is not the only such system, but it is the simplest. Unfortunately, it is not completely standardized, as some software manufacturers prefer to label middle C as C3 instead of C4, and then adjust octaves accordingly. Nevertheless, once the name for middle C is agreed upon, and we will agree upon middle C as C4, the octave designations become very useful. Note that the chart extends the pitches below the F clef staff using additional ledger lines, and also above the G clef staff using ledger lines. Actually, we can extend to several more pitches in both directions that are not pictured here by using additional ledger lines. Here's some more information on ledger lines. It is important to realize that several notes can be added above the F clef staff by using ledger lines. This is particularly useful when writing music for several bass clef instruments. For example, the trombonist can easily play a note as high as G4, but would prefer to see all of his or her notes in the bass clef. This example shows a practical group of notes that can be played by many bass clef instruments. These pitches start with the space above the staff on B3 and then extend above middle C as high as G4. Middle C is always a good reference point, especially when comparing notes in different clefs. For example, the same pitches that you're looking at could easily be played by a clarinetist, but he or she would prefer that all the notes be written in the treble clef, as you're seeing now. In fact, the clarinetist can play notes even lower than this, but by tradition, they would be notated in the G clef. Now you are seeing notes where the G clef is extended down even further with ledger lines, and the corresponding pitches as they would be notated on the F clef. It is particularly important to observe the proper way to use and write ledger lines. The musician only writes ledger lines as needed to extend the staff. It is similar to building a little ladder to extend the pitches upward or downward. It is incorrect to write extra ledger lines if they are not needed. Also, the spacing of the ledger lines should be exactly the same as the spacing of the lines of the staff. Here are some common mistakes. In this example, the note to the left, the D4, is written with an extraneous ledger line below it. This is not necessary, as the pitch has not extended far enough below the staff to warrant that line. The correct notation is given to the right. A similar example is shown here in the F clef. In the next example, the A5 pitch above the G clef is very ambiguous because the spacing of the ledger line is much larger than the spacing of the lines in the staff. The notation to the right is much more clear and accurate. And here is a similar situation in the bass clef.